Let me ask you a question. Have you ever been in a situation where you've worked hard on a deal, felt really good about the sale, and thought for sure you were going to get the business? And then the next thing you know, you're blindsided when the client decides to go with another vendor? If so, you're not alone. We've all been there at least once within our career. Most of the time when this happens, it comes down to one of two scenarios. Either the client does not fully see the value of the solution that we have to offer, or somewhere along the way a new person has entered into the equation and has had an influence on the decision-making process. Often we only find out about this person once a deal has been done and we take the time to sit down with our champion or our contact within the organization just to try to find out what happened. Well, if you want to mitigate the risk of this ever happening again, or if you want to do everything that you can to avoid it from happening to you, then here's one thing that you need to make sure that you've covered off in every single deal: the stakeholders. Did you know that in every single B2B sale, there are always three stakeholders involved in the decision process? There's always an economic stakeholder, a technical stakeholder, and a user stakeholder. Now, I want to talk about each one of these and give you examples on how to recognize each one of these based upon what questions that they ask or the things that they may say. However, before I do, I want to make sure one thing is absolutely clear. It's vital that you understand that the term stakeholder refers to a role within the decision-making process and may not refer to a specific individual. To be more specific, one person could play one, two, or even three of these stakeholder roles. Or there could be one person who is playing one specific role. I hope this makes sense, and I know that sometimes it can be a little bit confusing. And I hope that through some of the examples that we're going to walk through, you'll see exactly what I mean. However, I just want you to remember that in every single B2B sale, you will find these three stakeholders as part of the decision-making process. The first one is the one that we'll all recognize: the economic stakeholder. The economic stakeholder is a person who ultimately owns a budget and as a result signs off on the purchase. Now, one of the lessons that I personally learned the hard way early in my career is that purchasing or the procurement department, they're not the economic stakeholders. Yes, they are often the ones that we deal with to get the final paperwork and final negotiations. However, they do not own the budget. Purchasing or that procurement officer, they're simply an administrative function within the organization, much like HR or even legal. They're often tasked with not only trying to save the company money by negotiating with vendors like you and I, they're also there just to make sure the necessary paperwork and process is in place. Now, the economic stakeholder, they're the ones that ultimately own the budget for the project or the initiative that you're working on. Depending upon the size of the organization, the size of the deal, the economic stakeholder could be anyone from a manager up to the CEO. In smaller organizations, it is often the CEO. However, in larger organizations, many mid-level managers or directors often carry their own budget. Simply based upon the name, the economic stakeholder, I'm sure you can guess what their main focus is when making a decision: cost. Notice that I said cost and not price. Although price is a factor, the economic stakeholder is concerned more about the lifetime costs and the value of what you have to offer. Things like return on investment and the value proposition of your solution as it relates to helping them and the company meet their objectives, these are the key hot buttons for the economic stakeholder. The second role is the technical stakeholder. The technical stakeholder is focused on if and how your solution fits within their current systems and processes. This person or role will be interested in understanding how your solution works and how it will integrate or connect to the other systems that they already own and have in place. The technical stakeholder will often be the voice of, here's how things work within the organization, and will be looking to understand how your products or services fit. Ease of integration and the ability for your products and services to work well with what they already own and what they already have will be key hot buttons for the technical stakeholder. One last thing is that often the technical stakeholder will be the one that will often know most about the overall requirements of the solution. So for example, if the company or the organization were to put together an RFP or a request for proposal for the solution, this would often be driven by the technical stakeholder. Finally, the third stakeholder is the user stakeholder. This role represents the users, or the people who will ultimately be using or consuming the products or services that you're offering. Often the user stakeholder is either someone like a team lead, a respected or senior member of the team who will ultimately be working with what it is that you're offering. Ease of use and the functionality, these are the things that will appeal to the user stakeholder. So at this point, let's take a couple minutes to give an example to help show who within an organization may play the various roles. Let's use the example that we work for an IT training company. Imagine that you're the salesperson who works for a company that sells this IT or technical training. In this type of example, who do you think could play the user stakeholder? Who do you think would be the user stakeholder? Any ideas? Well, maybe someone like the senior, more influential members of the team that are actually being trained would be the user stakeholder. Or even maybe it's a team lead for that team that's going to be receiving the training from you. They're the user stakeholder. Does that make sense? Now, who do you think may be the technical stakeholder in this type of scenario? Any thoughts? Well, assuming we're selling IT or technical training, it could be the IT manager or even someone like the training director if one exists within the company. These people, this person, they're going to be wanting to know how your training fits in and hopefully complements the training that they've already received in the past or even the information that they've received from other trainers. So now, who do you think may be the economic stakeholder? Well, could be the IT director or the vice president of IT. They would most likely own the budget for the training of the team to ensure that the team had the knowledge and the skills necessary to deliver on the projects that they had on the go. Depending upon the size of the organization or even the price of the training that we're offering, it could also be the CEO, the COO, or even the CFO. However, again, they're the ones who have a line item in their operating budget for the training and the enabling of the team. Does that make sense? Let's do one other example. I know that we're B2B salespeople. However, just to demonstrate a point, let's use something that we can all relate to. Buying a car. Now, in this scenario, I'm not going to focus on as much who plays what role, but rather focus on what you may hear from each one of the stakeholders, what they may say or the questions that they may ask. One of the great things about knowing each of these stakeholders is that most of the time you can tell which role they're playing based upon the questions that they ask or the things that they say. All you need to do is listen. So if we're using buying a car as an example, what do you think the user stakeholder may ask or say? Any ideas? Well, some of the things that they may say or the things that you may hear would be something like, does it have a sunroof? You see, the user stakeholder is most likely thinking about themselves, or they're, driving down the road and they're imagining themselves on a nice sunny day driving the car and having the sunroof open. So they're imagining themselves using the vehicle. Another question that they may ask is, how do I turn on the radio? You see, you can tell just based upon that question that they're asking it from the user's perspective of how to use something within the vehicle. So obviously they'd be considered the user stakeholder. Now, what do you think the technical stakeholder may say or ask? Well, it could be something along the lines of, is it an automatic transmission? My son does not know how to drive standard. You see, the person is asking this, thinking about how this vehicle is going to be integrated with his or her family and thinking about how it's going to be used. Does that make sense? Let's try another one. This stakeholder may ask something like, does the stereo have iPhone integration? You see, they know that either themselves or others have lots of music and everybody likes to play from their iPhone. So having that iPhone integration is a requirement for any car that they purchase. So clearly, this person is playing the role of the technical stakeholder. Now, the economic stakeholder, I'm sure you can imagine some of the questions that they may ask, right? Well, the obvious one is, how much does it cost? But more likely, they're going to ask, what are the monthly payments? You see, they're asking about the monthly payments to make sure that it fits within their budget and that they're able to make those monthly payments on the car. Maybe they'll ask something like, how often is maintenance needed? You see, in this case, they're most likely thinking about the overall cost to maintain the vehicle, again, to ensure that it's within their budget. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so now take a few minutes to think about your own situation and when you last bought a car. Who played which role? Or was it you as an individual that played one, two, or even all of the roles? Think about it a little bit, and I'm confident that you can easily identify the roles based upon the questions of the process that you went through. Now, I want to leave you with one other key bit of information regarding stakeholders. Think about your ability to close a deal but in the perspective of percentages. If you only cover off one of the stakeholders, then you most likely only have anywhere between 25 to 50% chance of closing the deal. Now listen, if I had a nickel for every time that a rep told me that they absolutely know the stakeholder, have a great relationship with the decision maker, and they see the value, and sure enough it's a done deal, I'd be a very rich man. Now let's just use the example that all you've done is you've dealt with just the economic buyer, the economic stakeholder, and you've spent all of your time and you've built a good relationship, you've been able to properly articulate the value of your solution to them. Let me ask you a couple questions. Do you think that they would actually go ahead and buy something that may or may not work with what they already own and already have in place? Not likely. Do you think that they would ever want to buy something that the users hate or do not want to use? Again, not likely. So the point out of this is that your chance of success goes way up based upon you engaging all three stakeholders. Not only to understand the requirements, but also to ensure that they see the value of what you have to offer. Now, if you covered off two of the three stakeholders, then think about the fact that your chance of closing that deal goes up to about 75%. Now, if you covered off all three stakeholders, then your chance of success and likelihood of closing that deal goes up to almost 100%. Now, let's be clear here. Am I suggesting that you're going to close every deal? No, I can't do that. However, what I'm guaranteeing you is that if you ensure that you covered off all three stakeholders, then you won't be blindsided by thinking a deal is yours and then all of a sudden finding out that it's went to one of your competitors. So when it comes to looking at your current sales opportunities, let me ask you a question. Have you covered off all three stakeholders? If not, then you may want to identify and engage them sooner rather than later. Now, as we're looking at planning your next sales call, do you know what role they're playing within that process? If not, no big deal. We just need to make it a priority to find out when we're in front of them. Okay? I hope that makes sense. That one thing, truly understanding the stakeholders, I can guarantee you, you know what? If you incorporate it into your ongoing sales process and you incorporate it into your strategy and your sales calls moving forward, you will significantly increase your chance of success. You'll close more deals and you can reduce or even eliminate the risk of being blindsided by a client's decision to purchase a different solution even after you've invested all of your time and effort into working the deal.